curious, your
Muted.
Is it on the calendar year or is it starting July 1st?
Fiscal year July 1st. So yeah, that was one of the things. We had just completed prepping our fiscal year 2021 budget, which will go to council in June. But of course, all of this happened actually after. We had completed that effort in late February, early March, and we're moving forward with a number of new positions as well as a projected growth in overall business volumes based on the past couple of years activities. So we've had to take a second look at that. At this point, we're doing more of a freeze rather than a cut budget scenario, because we also in Ontario, we do a quarterly review and update to our budget. So if we need to react, we'll be able to react pretty early on in the year if additional cuts or if additional savings is warranted.
You're not going to change the budget. You're just going to kind of wait to see how it goes for right now.
At this point.
Did you have any existing operational contingency plans that worked for COVID, or do you think you will update after COVID? Like what you did it work? Do you have best practices? Anything you want to share?
Yeah, I would say we're probably all learning that this is a new area for us. It did force us to take a look at our emergency operations center as well. Here we have what we call a departmental emergency operations center as well. So where the EOC, I'll call it, was activated, in this particular instance, our departmental emergency operations center wasn't activated because it was more on a citywide response basis, health and public safety, et cetera. But I would definitely say we will definitely be looking at that because, of course, being in California, we were mostly geared for fire and earthquake type emergencies. So this is completely different. And there wasn't a lot of guidance in our existing documentation as to how to deal with this sort of a situation.
Great, thank you. Well, I don't see any other questions, so thanks so much for being here. Super informational, and yeah, keep up the good work. I can only imagine everything you guys are going through, so thank you.
Thank you, Tracie.
So with that, yeah, no problem. With that, we're going to go ahead and move on to Joe LaMariana with ReThink Waste. So Joe, take it away.
Thank you, Tracie, and great stuff, Michael. Keep up the good work there. First of all, real quick, our agency is a public agency. We're a joint powers authority that's owned by 12 local municipal jurisdictions. We're about $130 million a year operation. We have a franchise operation that's contracted to operate through Recology. We have a facility in San Carlos that has a transfer station and a MRF, and we contract South Bay Recycling excuse me, to operate that facility, handle the material, sort it, transport it, and market it. So it's, we probably have 400 people that are based on the site. So we have real strong partners there. Like Michael, we first started getting a sense of this in late February. And in fact, at our board meeting on February 27th, there was some discussion on this, but of course it was not super top of mind to everybody at that point. People sort of knew it was in the background. I'll tell you, by the March 26th board meeting, not only was it top of mind, a few major things happened. At the board meeting, I asked for and received board approval for emergency actions that, frankly, if we ever had to enact them as like a dagger in my heart, it would be to landfill recyclable materials if in fact there were no markets for it, or if we were to somehow have our labor and sorting operations interrupted. And I will say that South Bay Recycling not only markets our material, they ship it, but they ship it to ports, etc. And one of the things that they raised early on was the possibility, this hasn't come to fruition yet, but the possibility that there was very, very light ship traffic at the Port of Oakland, which is where we distribute our fiber materials to the Pacific Rim markets. And if there could be a case where there are no ships and therefore there's nowhere to send our materials. So I think long-term as an industry, we ought to be looking at environmentally sensitive ways to bring some of that hoping handling back to the States, back to the West Coast, and now we're not shipping that material halfway around the world and being subject to political nuances going on there. For us, the whole situation got real when our county and 6 other Bay Area counties public health officials formed a shelter-in-place order. That was on March 17th, and I'll share some tonnage information with you in a moment. But from that point on, we literally have been receiving 50% of the material in our transfer station, which is rather shocking. Of course, early on, both our contractors, Recology and South Bay Recycling, were already planning and executing distancing and PPE practices. They were asked, excuse me, in the mornings I get a little allergy here. They were asked very directly at both the February and the March meetings by our board and our staff what those practices were, so they had great elaboration there. On March 17th, we interpreted our public health order to close all non-essential facility or operations to include our public access to our transfer station. That's why the tonnage dropped by 50% immediately, directly correlating to that. We also had Recology discontinue the bulky item collection and abandoned waste programs because of those are very, the workers, when they get out of their trucks and they're touching the material, unlike the automated trucks that represent the majority of their fleet, those operations tend to be very engaging, both with the materials itself and possibly with people and people walking by. So that was discontinued on the 17th. And because of that, we've got about 10 to 14 workers at the transfer station that would normally be our scale masters, traffic spotters, people on the floor directing the loaders and what to do. So there's probably 10 to 14 of those. And I did approve on April 9th, I want to say, yeah, April 9th, in order to do probably a dozen different, what I would call industrial strength maintenance programs that needed to be done around the site. And actually, because of the reduced truck traffic and activities, it actually is a terrific time to be getting those projects knocked out. But the answer, or not the answer, the implication is that when that list of projects is done, those folks will probably be eligible for furlough. So I hope we can keep them going in that regard. I will say that the Recology folks have received, the customer service center has received a deluge of commercial either cancellations of the service or modifications, reduction down of the service. And so interestingly, true to what Michael was saying, we've actually seen a slight uptick in the residential. There's no surprise. I mean, I don't know who else is out there, but who's been cleaning out the garage? Who's been cleaning out those back closets? Our family's certainly been hard at work at that. So we've seen about, in MSW, it's 5 or 6% uptick. In commercial, in recycling, commingled recycling, it's been up 13%. So our MRF is really jamming along there. Organics is about even, so no particular surprise there. Commercial is down something like 70%. It's quite shocking, and that is the wild card to all this discussion is what happens when the public order is lifted, and what does that mean to our operation and our business? I can see long term where we may have to work with our franchise partner Recology to have a route consolidation of their commercial operations if there is indeed a significant reduction in accounts or lifts. They may go from 5 times a week service to twice a week service. It makes no sense at all to send a truck out there 5 times a week to pick up air in the bins there. So just wanted to touch on a couple of things moving forward. So right now our current health order expires. We're supposed to be back at work on Monday, May 4th. From everything I've heard from all my my previous colleagues and government contacts, although it's not official, it does appear that the health order will be extended either through May 15th or perhaps to the end of May. That is 100% speculation. Don't go to the bank on it, but that does seem to be, where the discussion is right now. We've got a couple ways to address the giant hole, the gaping hole in our budget. Like Michael, we've had our budget done for the last couple of weeks here, as if it were based on normal operations. So on May 12th, we're going to have a finance committee meeting of our board. It's a subcommittee. They do a first cut of our budget, and they will take a look at what we've proposed. That would be sort of non-COVID normal year budget as a baseline. And then we're going to do some sensitivity analysis and have a couple of variables for what does this budget look like at a 10% reduction in costs and perhaps even a 20%. We're looking for them for a little extra direction on this as well. One thing I should mention, perhaps it's stating the obvious, but although we're seeing a dramatic drop in tons, which in our case means revenue, there are also associated expenses that go with that. So for instance, for every ton of municipal solid waste or garbage that goes into the landfill, we're not getting the tip fee on that, but we're also not paying to have it transported and disposed of either. So I don't have the numbers handy at the moment. Our senior finance manager, John Mangini, is working very, very hard to start doing some calculations. As I say, we have a board meeting this afternoon at 2. We're not going to have them ready by then, but we certainly will have them ready by the finance committee on May 12th, excuse me, and then our board meeting then. And at that point, I think is going to be the moment of truth of where we go. We'll be a couple more weeks down the road. We'll have a bit more information, and we can take it from there. So sharing the numbers themselves, as I said, the overall tonnage in our site literally was cut in half on March 17th. And particularly with the commercial tonnage, I've already shared the residential waste stream. One thing I haven't mentioned is construction and demolition material has gone to zero. So we went from 100% to 0% in one day, which is quite shocking. But all that material comes through the gate, and we no longer have the gate open for public use. So let's see here. All categories of commercial have dropped dramatically. Green waste, of course, the public health order has had several clarifications along the way, where there were gardeners still working for a couple of weeks, and the public health orders have been explicit about no gardening, no gardening, no landscaping, commercial landscaping, and of course that's the feedstock that comes through the gate for commercial green waste. I'll end with this, and I'll be happy to take questions. We have a brand new project we've worked on for a year and a half. It is an organics to energy project where we want to take source separated commercial organics, and probably 2/3 of that and about 1/3 of our organics rich garbage loads, merge them together in a grinder that would then reduce the material to organic fine sizes and bring to wastewater treatment plants. We've been in the making on this for a year and a half. We just completed the last item on the checklist for us to be able to flip the switch and operate. We completed that last night with a fire inspection of the sprinkler system, fire suppression system. So we would be normally ready to flip the switch and be so excited, but guess what? There's no commercial source separated organics here. So we are supremely frustrated with that. And now we're wondering, is it going to come back? I've seen estimates that probably between anywhere from 30, 40, and even 50% of our neighborhood restaurants are going to be knocked out of business because of this horrible situation. And if that's the case, it's going to be a very challenging and puzzling situation on how we move forward with this wonderful program. By the way, it's about a $5 million program. The County San Mateo chipped in a very sizable grant. The Cal Recycle folks, thank you, Kara and team up there, chipped in a very sizable grant for it. And we're just thrilled about this. We see this as the future and tying directly into our 1383 responses. And we thought we were ahead of the game, and all of a sudden we're standing here, and there's like zero material coming in that we would have expected normally about 100, 120 tons a day of material. So that's really, really frustrating and exasperating. So Tracie, that concludes my report. Not my report. I'm getting into
Once
board
an
mode.
executive director, always, right? Well, you said
Yeah,
that you're getting ready before the meeting, so.
I'm in the pre-game mode. Yes, thank you.
So there are a few questions. When you are stating organics has remained the same, are you talking about commercial or residential?
I was talking about residential. Yeah, they're even.
Okay.
Showed at one point
great.
down a percentage point. Now they're up a percentage point, so they're about even. Call it even.
Do you know how much of the residential tonnage increase is due to increase in disposables, such as single-use foodware? Have you tried to encourage more use of reusables, washing cotton gowns in hospitals, et cetera?
Boy, that's a great question, and I don't have a great answer for that. I think it's been everything we can do just to hold on and try to shift here. We haven't done, other than we've had a very aggressive, I want to credit our outreach and communications team, Julia Al and Joanna Rosales-Jose. They've done a marvelous job through social media of getting the word out on a lot of those kinds of messaging. We've had a very active social messaging campaign going on right now. So I would say through that would be how we're trying to get the word out. But all other focus and activities has really been on just dealing with the daily sort of issues relating to the operations. I should also mention, while we're keeping 10 to 14 people busy with those necessary projects going on our site, SBR, and by the way, these are SBR's employees, not the agency, so I need to be real clear on that. So SBR gave us notice that last Thursday, they did furlough 8 long-haul drivers. And that is going to be a red hot topic at 2 o'clock this afternoon. Our International Brotherhood Teamsters Local 350 will be partaking in our board meeting and has a very strong opinion about that. But that's an issue between the employer and the employee, and we are neither in that particular case. So we're very sympathetic to what they're saying, but we're hoping to find some other options there. So that's a real world situation right now.
Another question. So to confirm, your JPA has interpreted public drop-off as non-essential. Does that include public drop-off buyback of recyclables? How was that determination made?
Yes, I need to be clear on that statement. The board did not determine it. I determined it. That was within my authority to interpret what the public health code was. So I have been credited / criticized for that. That kind of comes with the territory, but I do want to give some protection to my board on that. They have agreed with my recommendation and staff recommendation, if you will. To the issue of the buyback center, boy, that opens up a whole other conversation. As we all remember, last August, there was a whole topsy-turvy situation in the market when the good folks at Replanet went out of business, and that caused a tsunami of activity in our buyback center to the point where we actually had to temporarily close it, and then we had to permanently close it because our facility operates in a very precarious side road, and we were getting hundreds of extra people in line there, and it was causing real traffic safety concerns. There were road rage incidents. There was all kinds of stuff going on. So, so that operation actually has been closed, and we do have a public recycling center that is available for people to drive through and drop off materials, drop and go, so to speak. No fees, no reimbursements or anything. That has also been closed. So the facility has been closed to all public traffic and all public commerce.
So last question, how is the MRF continuing operation with social distancing and PPE? Can you give specifics? Did you reduce belt speeds? How much automation do you have? Several Southern California MRFs say they can't do it and closed.
Right. I've been reading that with great interest. SBR, we've been really locked in on this, and I have to compliment South Bay Recycling. They've done a really good job of trying to, find that sweet spot between maintaining and honoring our employee safety and through the distancing. So literally, we have a highly automated facility. We run about our outbound tonnage is about 70,000 tons a year, or about 250 tons a day. So it's a pretty big time facility, and we have there's a human component to it. There's a lot of automation, but there's a human component to it. And the folks that are doing the sorting are now spaced much more, further apart from each other. I should also mention we are currently doing a $6 million upgrade. Excuse me, it's a $12 million upgrade, but it's the first phase of it to the equipment that we put in about 10 years ago. And that work is being done after hours. So from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. Tuesday through Friday, and then 24 hours around the clock on Saturdays and Sundays through July. That work has not stopped. So we've got that to juggle as well. And they're doing it after shift is what's happening. So a lot going on.
Yeah, thanks so much, Joe, for your time and sharing all that with us. Really, really incredible. Appreciate your efforts there in this new territory. So with that, we're going to go ahead and transfer it over to our last presenter, Leslie Lukacs. I have some feedback, so just make sure everybody's muted. And with that, Leslie, take it away.
Great. Thank you, Tracie and Joe and Michael. So I am also with the JPA, Zero Waste Sonoma. We have 10 jurisdictions with 10 board members. So we are structured very different from the other previous presenters. We do manage all the compliance for all of the cities within our county. We operate our own household hazardous waste facility, and we also oversee the hauling of organics for our county, which we contract with Recology. So we are not the county. Sometimes we get mistaken as the county, but we do contract with the county for services. So we lease office space from the county. The county does our HR, IT, and some accounting services. So with the waste management infrastructure in Sonoma County, the county owns the landfill, but Republic operates the landfill. And Republic also operates a separate facility where they accept single stream recyclables. They have a buyback center as well as a Dropbox service. We have 3 haulers in our county, with Recology servicing 8 out of the 10 haulers, or 8 out of the 10 cities. So our revenue structure is very different. Our revenue structure is from our organics contract of the outhauling, as well as an agency surcharge on the tip fee, where we get most of our funding from. So it's kind of interesting that we're, for zero waste and promote zero waste practices, but the way our agency structure is structured is by how much, we get funding by how much is thrown away. We also did an initial budget, our pre-COVID budget, that was going to be going to our board in March, but our March board meeting was canceled. So that led me to think, oh gosh, this pre-COVID budget isn't really realistic now that we're living in the COVID moment. One of the things that helped change my mind was I attended the SWANA webinar with Michael Hoffman. He's an economist in our industry, and he gave a really good rundown from an economic viewpoint of somebody who studies this, of what we may experience. And he called Q1, which Q1 for him was January 1st to April, March till March. And he said it'd be really messy, but we're really not going to know our numbers because shelter in place kind of started happening in March. And so Q1, we won't really get a clear picture, but he called Q2 shock and awe. That's really where we're going to see the change in the numbers that we're seeing now that have been presented. And then in the second half of the year, we're going to kind of slowly go up from our worst point in disposal, and slowly it'll be a gradual, and then who knows how long it'll take to get to normal. So I knew I needed to change the budget, that it wasn't going to be realistic anymore. So I reached out to about 7 JPAs, including Joe, some other surrounding counties, just to get a sense of, you know, what they were seeing within their jurisdictions and how they were managing their budgets. I also looked to our 2008 budget change. That was when the recession was happening. So I wanted to see if there was budget reductions back then, because, you know, thinking that we're going to be going into a recession, if we haven't already started one, that, you know, what type of budget cuts were made back then. And I learned that back then it was a 14% cut to the budget. There's some other things that are unique to Sonoma County. You know, we are an agricultural and tourist county, so we are greatly affected by all of this. You can imagine how many events the wineries draw, the restaurants, our hotels. I can only imagine with the cities in the county, the effects they're going to feel with lost revenue from, you know, capacity or overnights from the hotels. So our commercial industry has been greatly affected. And so the other thing that's unique to our county is 60% of our waste stream is commercial. So when commercial takes the hit, it's actually the largest part of our waste stream. So I also reached out to the landfill, reached out to Republic. They're reporting a 25% reduction in tonnage at the landfill. Debris box service is down about 80%. And there is an increase that's been reported for the residential as well. So what I ended up deciding to do, you know, we talked about it internally, and we looked at our budget, and we decided to do a 10% cut across the board with our budget. And what that meant to us was we were planning on moving. We were actually in the March board meeting, we were going to present our lease agreement to move. So the move has now been canceled. That has saved about $90,000 right there. We are stopping you know, professional development, sponsorship, membership. I know I'll be joining, you know, CRRA and other groups just, you know, out of my own pocket this year until we, you know, figure out what's going on. You know, we reduced our advertising budget. We do a recycling guide every year that we print. We decided not to print that this year because there's so many influx of events that are getting canceled right now. Services are changing. It just wasn't a right time to put something in print. So we have now posted that on our website. We had 2 internship spots. We have now, you know, cut those 2 positions. And then we also have a reduction in hauling for our organics. So that's where a big portion of our budget was also reduced. So we reduced our budget. Our revenue is about over 8 million. So we reduced it by 10% of 8 million. So that's, you know, taking a pretty good hit to our budget. The good news is we did not touch reserves. Reserves are being saved for even a rainy day. You know, if I'm wrong with the 10%, at least I still have reserves that are there that we could pull from. And then also we're going to remain all of our staffing, and I will see that through. Some other changes in our county, we had 4 buyback centers left. 1 buyback center has already closed. A second buyback center has closed, but said that they will open up May 5th. And the other 2 buyback centers are still open. Our HHW facility, we typically operate 3 days a week. We have now reduced that to 2 days a week. We typically have 7 people working there. We only have 3 now, and we chose 3 because we felt that they could do safe social distancing. And it's kind of interesting what happened with HHW, because in the beginning, we only had about 60 customers per day, and, you know, average is about 120. Well, we started to see an increase week by week of material going to our HHW facility. To this current week, we're seeing 150 people per day, which is way too much for the 3 people who are working there. It's way above normal. So we know people are, you know, cleaning out their, you know, garages, bringing their material to us. So we decided to open up a 3rd day again. And we're not really making that public. We're not going to, you know, do a big splash. We are going to announce it on our website, but because we want to try and prevent people from, you know, using the roads, coming to our facility. We want to make sure people are safe. But that's just an interesting trend that we're seeing with our HHW facility. We have canceled all of our HHW collection events and rover events that we do throughout the community on a weekly and monthly basis. And then our e-waste program, we also canceled our e-waste collection events, but we still are collecting e-waste at our transfer stations. So, you know, cutting the budget by 10%, that's the best guesstimate we could come up with. You know, based on the number of factors that I shared with you of how we got to that number. I don't know if 10% is too high to cut our budget. I don't know if it's too low. But the good thing is we can always come back to our board and do a mid-year adjustment or a quarterly adjustment if we're seeing that 10% was off. So there's still so much unknown out there of how this is all going to unfold. So that's, as an agency, how we chose to handle our budget.
Great, thanks, Leslie. We do have a few questions for you. If you have to maintain these cuts, how do you think that will impact your ability to comply and be successful with SB 1383 requirements, such as reporting, staffing, education, monitoring?
What we did keep was our core programs, which is exactly what you stated. So we don't expect any of that to change. We're not reducing staff. We all have you know, the staff who are doing those compliance programs. That's all staying intact. We cut budget in other ways.
Are there any suggestions on how members can combat a county order that closed their recycling buyback center?
We are actually just looking into that now. I was really interested to hear what CRRA Morgan had said in the beginning of this webinar. I only learned yesterday that our buyback, two of the 4 buyback centers have closed. So that's a very fluid situation for us, but we are looking into that. And we reached out to the LEA yesterday to figure out what their take of it is, but we have not heard back from them yet.
And then similar question, given the economic recession dynamics, has anyone received additional criticism for closing the buyback centers when people need money for recyclables as a means to survive? I guess this is more of a panel question, but have you noticed that?
Yes, actually, that's how we found out the buyback center was closed, because of our hotline for our agency. And you know, people are complaining that the buyback centers are closed when you know, they're experiencing economic hardship, and that was something that they could rely on. So it is something I take seriously, because I do know people are struggling out there.
So this question is kind of for maybe both you and Joe. Has anyone thought about going beyond quantification of the decrease in commercial tonnage to characterizing it? Which businesses and institutions are up and which are closed, like merchants closed, higher education institutions closed, large businesses? Like, have you or Joe, have you guys done any research on that to really understand what the impact has been and from whom?
I'll jump in real quick, Tracie. The simple answer to the question is not yet. We certainly have that queued up. We want to understand what that is all about, but frankly, we've been trying to just keep up with the daily operational challenges and programmatic challenges to keep the whole thing going. So that is kind of what I would consider to be the next tier of data gathering and understanding how we shape the programs moving forward. So it's on the book, but just not quite yet.
Yeah, and just kind of a follow-up to that, is there a waste characterization study on waste generated per business type? Obviously not yet, but that might be something interesting to really understand the impact of COVID has had on our businesses. All right, and then one last one, trying to figure out what the new norm of service levels will be for businesses, average service levels and ratios, recycling or organics. I don't know that anybody really knows that yet. I imagine that might be a good webinar in the future. So thank you, Leslie, so much, and Joe, we really appreciate your guys' efforts, and good luck with your budgets and everything else. And if anybody has any further ideas for webinars, please reach out to us and let us know. I noticed that Despina put a survey out there that you can click on and just generate your ideas, would be really helpful. And if you want to present, because you've got a lot of information you want to share, by all means, send me an email as well. So with that, we'll go ahead and close. Thank you both, Joe, Leslie, and Mike and Kara for being on the webinar, and we'll look forward to the next one. Take care. Have a safe week.
Thank you, Tracie. Thank you, Despina.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody. Yeah, let me, yeah, it's such a nightmare. They're both Blue Cross, and I deal with.
Hi, this is It's the Natural Product and the Law Office of Serene St. John. Leave messages for either company here, and we will get back to you as soon as we can.
Health insurance policy. This is a follow-up, and we'd love to hop on the call to discuss some options.